Alrighty, we have started. Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca from One More Page Books, and I am here. I'm going to riff for a little bit to let people get in here. But I'm so excited to be here for the launch of Penelope's newest book, Cry of Metal and Bone. I wanted to make sure I got it right. Oh, it's so beautiful. The covers are so gorgeous.
Oh, gorgeous.
But we're so happy to be launching Leslie's new book with Angelina Lopez. And I will tell you a little bit about them, give you some housekeeping notes, and then I will drop out of the stream and let these wonderful ladies take over. So first of all, a little bit about our two wonderful guests tonight. Leslie Penelope is an award-winning author of fantasy and paranormal romance, including the Eternal Flame series, the Cupid Guild books, and the Earthsinger Chronicles, the newest of which we are talking about tonight. She was born in the Bronx just after the birth of hip-hop, but left before she could acquire an accent, which I think is a delightful way of putting it. She studied film at Howard University and minored in computer science, and this led to a graduate degree in multimedia and a career in website development. And she says that sometimes she dreams in HTML, which I am impressed by. But she also lives in Maryland with her husband and her furry dependents, one of which ran out into the woods today, we discovered.
Yes, we had an incident this morning where the youngest, so Stokely is the kitten. He's 11 months old, and he really wants to be an outdoor cat, and he's an indoor cat. And he wants to be an outdoor cat so much that he will just race through any open doorway. And we keep a spray bottle by the door. Today he got out there, and he was out there for a couple of hours. And I was like, "Is he gone? That was the end of our kitten? Like we're just." But at the end of his time of exploration, he appeared back on the deck and walked right in the house. And so.
All right, vacation's over. Where's Dave? Thank you so much for joining us, Leslie. And Leslie will be interviewed tonight by the wonderful Angelina Lopez, who she writes sexy contemporary stories about strong women and the confident men lucky enough to fall in love with them. She's been writing professionally for her whole life, first as a journalist, and then now as a freelance magazine writer, and then now, as a romance author. The first two books in her Filthy Rich series, Lush Money and Hate Crush, are both out in the world. You can buy them. They're beautiful. And she lives with her family no longer outside of Washington, D.C.
No.
Elsewhere than Washington, D.C.
I'm Texan now. I'm a Houstonian.
A Houstonian.
Yes.
And you can find more about her at her website, angelinamlopez.com, which I will drop in the comment box. Speaking of the comment box, during the event, if any of you viewers have any questions for these wonderful ladies about their books, about writing, about anything at all, feel free to drop them in the comment box below or to the side, depending on which browser you're in. And Angelina will bring them into the conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to dip out and let these lovely ladies take over. Go for it.
I always love intros by Rebecca. They're always so much fun, and she's such a great resource. And if you are close enough to access One More Page, please go there and buy all of their amazing books and ask Rebecca everything about everything, because she will have something fun to talk about. So yay, Leslie, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here. I wanted to, I poured myself a glass of sparkly to toast your third book. It's it is such a huge milestone. The third book in a big, long, big, long fantasy series. It's the Cry of Metal and Bone. It's a third, and the Earthsinger Chronicles. And I needed to ask you, is this the final? And it's not. It's the third.
It's the third of 4 novels.
Yeah. So tell us about it.
So Cry of Metal and Bone takes place 6 weeks after the events of the first two, because the first 2 books in the series are parallel stories. So 6 weeks later, everything is in flux. And so we have 2 new characters, one brand new character for the novels, and then we have Lisbeth, the heroine, who was in the first book. And so she was a minor antagonist, and now she gets to redeem herself in this book. So there's a terrorist attack at the very beginning of the book, and so a crew is assembled to investigate, and they end up having to go to another country to investigate and try to prevent another terrorist attack. And so it's there's a love story, opposites attract, and have to find love amidst their differences. We have a city socialite rich girl and a pirate, a smuggler from another country who is a little bit more coarse. He's my Han Solo character. That was my kind of archetype tie. So yeah, they go and they investigate this, and the conflict of the whole series is still, you know, these two people who've been at war for 500 years, and can they come together, and can they ever actually find peace and unity?
Yeah,
it's what basically it's about.
What inspired the entire series for you?
The series, well, the first book, at first I didn't know I was writing a series. I thought I was writing a fantasy novella. I was like, I'm going to write this thing. It's 50,000 words. And so Song of Blood and Stone is the first book. And the first version was 50,000 words. And it was originally self-published. And I hired an editor, and she was like, this is too short. I don't understand what's going on. You have to expand this. It's not long. And so as I was expanding it and doing that revision, the idea for the rest of the series came to me. So initially, it was just a story of an isolated young woman who lived in a valley, and she was caught between two worlds. I really like the story of someone who is an outcast and really trying to find her identity, trying to find a place where she belongs in the world. And that's what the original story was. And it's still the theme of the whole series. It's just kind of, it expands a little bit with each book. So really the inspiration, I had the two ideas in my head. I don't know which one was first, but in the first book, very close to the beginning of the story, the main character, Jasminda, is standing on the porch with a shotgun in her hand. I had this image of this girl on a porch with a shotgun as she's watching this group of soldiers come closer to her isolated home.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to defend it. And then I also had this image of the hero who was captured and he was kind of beaten down, but he wasn't, and he gets up after being beaten and has just this enraged expression on his face. Mm-hmm. And like those kind of images were really clear. And then the story came from out of that. And everything else was an expansion of that original idea.
Yeah. I love those ideas that come from that, like pop in your head image, and then, being able to build on that. In terms of obviously my background's romance, and that's kind of where I'm writing in. what's the balance of it? Because there's definitely like always a couple in each. What's the romance, fantasy, sci-fi, balance ratio you're kind of doing there?
I think that it changed a little bit over the course of the series. The first two books are definitely fantasy romance. I see them as it's a fantasy story. It's an adventure story, but it's very important. The couple is very important to the story. As the third and the fourth book go on, I still have a couple. I still have a really strong romance at the core of each book, but it does get even bigger than that, and the scope has gotten bigger. So I saw one reviewer say that the first two books are fantasy romance, and the second two are romantic fantasy. And I might have that confused because different people have different definitions for those terms. I think that like a fantasy romance is a romance. A romantic fantasy has a strong romance in it, but probably has an HEA. I'm just giving you a spoiler. There's HEAs by the time you get to the end, but there's a lot more fantasy in it.
Yeah,
so it's really important to me to tell. I'm not interested in reading stories without a romance in them. So it's really important for me to write stories with romance in them, and I don't ever see that changing. Really.
But and what I loved about is this idea that there is a fully enmeshed romance in them, in this world with all of its rules. You had to completely make this world with all its rules, and definitely the story about two different cultures and cultures with people defined by kind of their color and their magic and that type of thing, coming together and finding a way to work together. So, what I found so fascinating about the series is just you bring in, issues of diversity and issues of strong women and romance, and yet we get the whole incredible Tolkien huge world building, that with all of that stuff that comes into play. How do you balance, like, when you're building a world? If you just think about, and I always just use Tolkien as kind of like the main, like, the maps and the mountain, all of this stuff, and then the rules of it. And then you're also trying to talk about kind of parallels between the world we're living in and kind of issues we're struggling with and a romance. How do you stuff all that into one. I guess you do 4 books. You don't do 1 book.
It's 4 books. Maybe that's why. Like, I just couldn't do it in one. But yeah, it's the stories that I wanted to read. So it's like, I love fantasy and science fiction just because of the parallels with the real world and the allegories. I think because I got into speculative fiction with like Twilight Zone, and that was the king of allegories. It was my mom's favorite show, and I always watched that growing up. So it's always linked in my mind. It was never just, oh, we're just going to go have a magic adventure. It's always, okay, what is this really saying, and how can you say something else but still entertain people?
Yeah.
And hopefully not like beat them over the head. And it's also just living life as a brown, Black person, a person of color in this country. There's no way to not think about that.
Yeah.
About issues. And so, yeah, like that, it was just really natural to have that in there. Like once I knew, my character was going to be Black and in a fantasy world, and she also was going to, feel isolated and feel disconnected culturally, and so everything else kind of came from, well, why? Asking those questions, why? Like if you have, like I said, I started with those pictures in my head. I started with those very small kernels of ideas.
Yeah.
And then building the story out was just like, well, why does she live there? And what happened to her? And why is she alone? And, why does she feel so isolated? And then the world just built itself up around the answers to those questions.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I go when I write. It's just like I have parts of the story that come to me, and then I'll come to a stopping point where I won't know the answer to a question. And then by answering it, I figure that out, and something else bigger has happened. And no, there's another country now, and there's another language, and there's another magic system. It's I try not to let it get away from me, because it has the potential to do that. But, and with the 4th book, it's really been, okay, did I go too far? Did I sprawl? Because I'm working on the 4th book right now.
Sure.
Which comes out next year. And it's been a struggle. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, but I also had, I expanded the books a couple of times, from going from self-published to being published by a traditional publisher.
Yeah.
And the scope has just really increased. And so keeping all of that in my brain and keeping all of that in a story that is not sprawling out of control is a challenge, definitely.
Is this been, in terms of world building, has it been mostly pants where you're writing it by the seat of your pants and expanding it that way? Or is it plotted? How do you manage, the sprawl and the writing and getting to a question that you can't answer and then answering it?
I do plot, but I consider myself a heavy plotter, but there's a lot of pantsing inside of plotting still. Like I'll have a 14-page, synopsis of the book before I start. But for a 130,000 word book, even a 14-page synopsis, you're still gonna have to pants a lot of the rest of it. So it's like, yeah, okay, I know they're gonna do this thing and go here and capture that or find that, but the details, and that's where the pantsing comes in. And so that's where, I think I do, I know where I'm going, I know the destination, and then like, while I'm doing the writing, I have to discover all of these things. And so, and I also believe that like your story exists in your subconscious somewhere. You're kind of just uncovering it. Mm-hmm. Because like, do you have those times when you write and you don't remember what you've written and you look back at it, you're like, I wrote that? How did I do that? It's an amazing feeling, right? It's like, that's not my brain. That's something else is happening here. And so I think on some level, all of this stuff exists, and it's just like up to me to find it and wrangle it, and then sort of push it into a form and a structure that makes sense to other people.
I found a short story recently as I was going through stuff, and I for whatever reason, wherever I found it on my computer was not where I would normally put stuff I was working on, and I read it, and I literally got through like 3 pages before I was like, oh, I must have written this, because the details were stuff from my life. And then I started like remotely like, okay, I think I remember, but literally it was 3 pages. Did not remember it at all. And it hadn't been that long, like maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, crazy.
You do world building too. I mean, you have the whole like fake country principality, right? How do you accomplish all of your world building too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, pantsing, definitely. But I pants it. I mean, it's without a doubt kind of this, what do I need here and what do I need? I mean, for me, because I'm so in Rome, it's so entrenched in romance, it's very much about, what do I need location wise, or do I need kind of atmospherically to make this scene connect emotionally? What needs to be happening? And again, it is representational. What in the, is it cold and dark, i.e. reflecting what's happening between the couple? Is it warm and sunny? Is it but what is happening? What do I need location wise to emotionally represent where they are as a couple, and then surround them in that? And I fundamentally think it's easier than what you're doing, even if it's a made up kingdom. I fundamentally think it's easier than it's the rules too. I mean, you have magic rules too. Is that something how do you manage your magic rules? Is that something you think about ahead of time and put a boundary around it? Or is it kind of just, your magic meets the needs of where you are in the story?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix. I mean, I think you have to have a system, because if the magic is just meeting the needs, then it can feel weird and like hand wavium is what they call it. Like, the magic can do anything. You don't want it to be like that.
Or do you?
So like after the first draft, when I kind of, the very, very first draft of the original book, Song of Blood and Stone, didn't really have a lot of magic in it. Right. And so then I kind of went back and created a magic system once I knew the story. Yeah. So it's kind of back and forth. It's like, I'll do some work and then I'll be like, okay, what can this magic do? And I laid out the rules for myself. And I have a couple, like a document that I typed up and like diagrams that I made. Like, okay, if you're at power 10, you can do these things. A person with only 1 can do that. And that's not in the book, but I wanted to know what a weak magic user versus a strong magic user could do, and what are the limits of it. Yeah. And then there's always something that you don't know, because things are lost in time and history and the way history works. There haven't been strong magic users for a long time. Yeah. Did the camera die?
You died. Oh no, just me. You died.
You'll have to improvise, Angelina.
Yeah. Oh no.
For a second. It's just a stupid thing that happens with my computer.
Oh no.
There we go. Well, we've got your audio now, I think.
Yeah, we have audio.
Okay. I had accidentally.
I'm going to disappear now.
I have another camera that I bought because of this, but we'll see what happens.
It looks perfect.
Okay, cool.
Magic. So, this is fascinating. So you've got diagrams, level 10 users, level 1. Power 10. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, that's not a term that's in the books, but yeah, like if I just wanted to know what someone's super strong and someone's super weak. So yeah, like a power 10, a power 1. Uh-huh. And then what are the limits of it? What can't it do? What can it do possibly in the world? And so at least that gives me a framework. And if I want to bend it a little bit, then I have to have a really good reason or ground it in something.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure I had like a structure around it so that I'm not just making up crazy things. Like the magic can do everything. And that's how I'm going to get out of this problem. When I paint myself into a corner, it's magic. Like that feels fun as a reader.
What's really interesting about that, it made me think, all of my books are about wildly wealthy people. So I've either got billionaires, millionaires, CEOs, or royalty. So they've got, massive levels of resources. And it's like, how can you write a book? Why would they have any problems? Like they can have whatever they want. Why would they have any problems if they've got billions? Why would they have any problems if they can do magic? And it is about the boundaries around it. And we do similar things, which is the magic. First of all, it gets used up. I mean, that's one of the things you use in the book, that it's something you use up, but it also, it creates responsibility that the magic creates, it can make a community suspicious of you. It can make, them not like you. That the magic creates a responsibility that in itself becomes a burden rather than it just being something cool. I can get whatever I want, which is how I approached my billionaires and CEOs and royalty, is that creates a burden. They have got all of these people they employ. They've got this kingdom they've got to take care of. And it's a burden that then creates boundaries, because there is no storytelling without
boundaries.
Yeah. And boundaries. And
And that was the thing about how billionaires and vampires and werewolves are kind of the same. Like they scratch the same itch in the reader. It's a very powerful, like alpha type of person, and when it's a man, but or your alpha females too. And so like that, it's that power. Whether you're a magical power, or vampire power, or billionaire power, you have to have something that brings it in check. Yeah.
And once you publish book 4, that whole like diagram is going to be like the best bonus content. Like that you have to do a bonus content, like really cool design, because you've got all that great graphic design. Like what all the magic is for everybody. We have a question from Read, Love, Listen. And who would you cast? Thank you very much for taking part. Who would you cast for your series or most recent book? Do you ever think about your cast, Leslie? When we get our movie deals, yay!
Yes,
Netflix deals, yay!
I am kind of bad with casting, but I think that, what did I say? For Ty, our smuggler pirate, ship's captain, I was thinking Jason Momoa, like something that name would be. Just give him some blue hair and be really awesome.
That would be fantastic.
Lizette, I said Halsey. Like I wanted someone who is she's biracial, but kind of ambiguous. And I don't know if she can act but that's kind of physically the type of person that is.
That's awesome. Whenever it's so easy for me to think of the male character, because I'm like, well, who do I want to meet as the writer who
when you're the career on set.
Like they don't look anything like them, the wrong age, but I don't care. Like, do I just get to meet them? And then they get to be like, hey, I'm going to hang out with you because you gave me a job. So Jason Momoa like hits all your boxes. It actually looks like who you want, which is awesome. Love Listen had another question. She said, do you have any input on the covers, which are so every time I see one of those covers, it's so phenomenally. They did such an amazing job.
Blow me away all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, and I was really partial to the original cover because when I originally got the deal with St. Martin's, they kept my self-published cover, which I adored. And then when they went to the paperbacks, they were going to rebrand and change them, and I was like, oh. But then I saw the covers, and I was like, oh, okay, these are fantastic. So in terms of input, I don't really get a lot of input. I mean, they ask me, okay, who should be on the cover with the characters? Who are it's the main characters usually, but for the last one, it was a little bit more. For book 4, if you've seen that cover, it's a little bit different. And then outfits, scenes for the bottom, because there's always a scene from like a setting on the bottom third about. And so I give ideas for that and just describe how everything looks. But my editor and the art team at St. Martin's Press really and then of course the illustrator, Jamie Jones, gets the credit for that because they are amazing. Yeah, definitely.
Every single time, it's just a complete event when one of your covers comes out because they're so beautiful. Now, so it is a 4-book I can't get my camera. 4-book series. So when does the next one come out?
The next one is out August of 2021.
Not that we want to talk about that because right now we're talking about the 3rd book. But why did you decide 4-book series? Did someone else? Why 4 books? I think we've gotten accustomed to 3 books. And why did you?
Sometimes as I'm working on the 4th one, I'm like, why is it 4? I should have done 3. It's 4 books and 3 novellas. Also, I'm self-publishing the novellas in between. Yeah, and that was my idea. So when I finished writing the first one, I was like, okay, I've got 4 couples. I'm going to do 4 books, 1 book per couple, just like romance, just like a normal romance series. Yeah. I got into the 2nd book. And so for those of you who've read Whispers, you'll realize that Whispers ends, people call it a cliffhanger. I don't call it a cliffhanger, but I will respect those who call it a cliffhanger. It doesn't end at the end of their story because I was writing that book thinking that it would. Sorry, my camera went out again. Yeah, I think it would. Oh, good. I go to the other camera. So this one shouldn't go out, hopefully. Cross fingers. Anyway, I was thinking that it would end, and then I was like, oh, wait, the story keeps going and going. I have to split it. I ended up having to split it into 2 and then bring in the other couple in the 3rd book. So Crown of Throne is the second half of Darwin and Kiara's story, who are Whispers of Shadow and Flame. And then we have Elizabeth and Ty's story also. And so, yeah, my initial idea of 4 books is still the case, 4 books, 4 couples. But as things happen, as you write, everything has got a little bit jumbled.
That's fantastic. Well, and again, like you get that world building with a fantasy series. And I think the readers and the fans are on board with this idea of it being, a more fully fleshed out story like that. Yeah, I think you get more to be able to do that. So yeah, so it's exciting that people get to read the second half today.
No, it's out now. You can read it now. Those of you who are mad at me for the cliffhanger, I'm sorry. That's just how it works.
Okay, so one of the things we both were talking about before we got on the camera is, and then we'll get another question in. But we both have been writing during 2020. I mean, I think if anyone's getting out of bed during 2020, all of you have been getting out of bed during 2020. Thumbs up, because yeah, it's a chore right now. It continues to be a chore. It's not getting any easier. We got some good news today, so that is pretty exciting. Kamala Harris being our
right.
Biden's running, so I'm going to cheer that as well. Actually, yeah. But anyway, so 2020 has been a challenge, and it's definitely been a challenge to produce creatively during 2020. So, how's it been going for you, Leslie? And kind of. You said you've got a book due September 15th. Is that what you said?
Yeah, in a month.
15th. You just put out this book. You've been working on a novella. You've got other stuff happening. How have you been getting words on the page?
Having a deadline is really helpful for me. That motivates me to get out of bed. But yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, I've worked from home for 13, 14 years. And so I know how to work from home. Like I know how to get out of your pajamas every morning and at least get into some yoga pants, like don't spend the whole day in your pajamas. So that didn't change, but the stresses definitely got to me, and I was having issues like everyone else. So I was like, well, let me just go through the techniques that have worked for me before in the past when I've had trouble writing, which is accountability. Accountability partners are like my main tip for any writers out there who are having problems. Make sure that you have someone that you can turn to. So it became for me about getting online with someone. My very good friend, Inez Johnson, who I've known forever since college, literally. And she's a very prolific author. She's very self-motivated, and she's up. And then I'll be like, okay, so I'll meet you online on Google Hangouts at 8 a.m. And so we meet at 8 a.m. and we write and we do sprints. And so having someone who's like waiting for me, who's going to check in on me if I don't show up and be like, where are you? That little bit of accountability and, not wanting to let someone down has really pushed me through. So it's really just my friends have helped me pull me through, and then I pull them through when they're down. And having a writing community is essential to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Like, how have you been dealing with it?
So I knew I was going to have a book coming out the end of June, and I had a book due August 15th, and I have a short story due August 21st. And we decided to move the house on the market, a pandemic, and move halfway across the country. I was like, okay. So Leslie and I share an agent. We both share an agent, the amazing Sarah Megabo. So when I told Sarah and my editor that I was going to be moving, they were both like, you have a lot going on, even if there wasn't a pandemic. So yeah, the main thing that I found really, really helpful was I was turning off my social media. I just went away. And I actually, because I had a book coming out, I was scheduling on Buffer my social media, but I was not looking at my news feed. I just turned off my news feed, and it managed my anxiety so much. And then I was time blocking. So it was like, this time I'm going to be doing these things. And I took a class with, Ronnie Lauren. So Ronnie, who also is our agent, Ronnie Lawrence is a phenomenal New York Times bestselling author who does a variety of writing classes. And she has a beta class called Fighting for Productivity for Writers, Fighting for Focus. And it was this amazing class about just how do you pair away on deadline? I mean, because that's the thing, a deadline doesn't, you can kind of squidge a deadline a little bit and move it, but it's coming regardless. And there are a bunch of people counting on you to have a book done on time. And so it does create it creates pressure, but it creates accountability too. And so, you have to pare away all of the other stuff. And because I had so many things going on, a move that I couldn't just pare away, it was like, this time blocking really allowed me to prioritize that between 12:30 between 9 and 12:30 I was writing, and then I was taking a half-hour break to take emails, and then another 2 hours writing, and I've just been doing that all summer, and it allowed me to confidently get a first draft done and lots of time to revise. And I've told Ronnie through like 20 different social media things that like I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't be in Houston where I moved. I wouldn't have a book done if it hadn't been for this class. It just gave me peace when I couldn't find it any other way. So yeah.
I'm a big believer in time blocking too. That's how I get things done. Because I'm still running my business, I'm still making websites, and I have to balance both of those things with these deadlines. And go through my day and chop it up and make sure that I know what I'm doing in every hour of the day. And
great writer Mindy Klasky, and she said, can you tell us how you write daily through writing retreats, something else? So you do time blocking to get your daily.
Yeah, I write, and so my schedule now is 6 days a week of writing. I find that having a day off, at least one day off a week, helps me just reset. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, even if I'm not writing, I'm plotting or researching or something on that day off. But planning that, retreats are nice. I would like to do more retreats, but I haven't. So it's just me here. I really thought about getting a co-working space, just to have to separate things, because I'm at this desk like all day long, a lot. And sometimes I want to be not at this desk, but I don't. Like ergonomically, I try to stay conscious of things because I've had some wrist issues. So I don't want to like get in the bed and write, or be with like a laptop on my lap. So it's like my wrists start bothering me. So I need to be at a desk. And so sometimes I think I've been here for 12 hours. I want to leave.
Oh wow!
But every day writing it works really well for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Read, Love, Listen has another great question. What is your favorite character that you've written, and are you similar to any of your characters? That's such a Sophie's choice. It's such a Sophie's choice.
Character. That's really, really hard. If you had to do it, and it's okay. I have a paranormal romance series, the Eternal Flame series. The books are Angel Born and Angel Fall, and there's a character in those series named Helix, who is an angel. And everybody loves Helix. It's everyone's favorite character who reads those books. I think he's also my favorite character. If I ever go back to that series, the plan was for Helix to get a book, but there have been various problems to the third book. So I was going to do 4 books in that series. I mean, they're standalone, so it's fine if you start those. But the third book has been written, but is not complete and doesn't want to be finished yet. But I want to finish it so I can get to Helix's book. And then am I similar to any of my characters? It's interesting because, so Song of Blood and Stone, the original versions, the paperback version is a special edition. So there's extra material in it. And there's an extra storyline with a character named Ella. And when I was going back to add, and I had to add that in afterwards, it's kind of a strange story about adding in a separate storyline to a book that's already been done. So I wanted to make sure that Ella was very different from Jasminda, who is the main heroine of the main storyline. And Jasminda is actually very much like me. And that actually got me thinking about how similar Jasminda is to me, because Song of Blood and Stone is the first novel I ever finished. So I think it's kind of natural for a character in the first novel to be very similar to you. I use Enneagrams when I create characters, and that's like a personality typing system. So there's 9 Enneagrams. I'm a type 5. Jasmine is also type 5. A lot of my first heroines are type 5s. So I had to make sure that Ella was the opposite of that. So that's why I made her as extroverted and charming as possible, like everything that I don't think that I am. I'm definitely not extroverted, and just loves people, is at ease around people. And so that's kind of, brought home the fact that Jasminda is much more like me. Probably the most like me of any of the characters. I think Kiara is also a type 5. She's the heroine of book 2. But there are differences between those two. Like I tried to make sure that none of them were too similar, even if they are the same personality types. And then any new characters I write are not no more type 5s in the series.
It is really difficult. I mean, I think there are, as a writer, there are innate preferences to certain personality types. You are an individual, you are a person, so you have innate preferences to certain personality types. But then when you're trying to inform a book with characters, it's trying to make them the world as varied and as different as, the world we currently live in. So it is trying to, create heroes, heroines, heroic characters with a lot of different character types that a lot of different
challenge. Yeah, trying to write someone who's completely not like you at all is a challenge, but it's fun. I think it's necessary for us to grow.
Yeah, and so what it's called, Enneagrams. I haven't.
ENNEAGRAMS, Enneagrams.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's like you can take a test like a Myers-Briggs thing, but there's 9 of them, and they have. Yeah, it's actually really interesting, and I've started. There was a workshop, an old RWA workshop that I bought at one point, where this person uses Enneagrams to create your characters. And once I started doing that, it was just like, oh, okay, it's a nice little shortcut. Even though that within each type, there's still, someone linked to it. There's still lots of different, options for how it expresses itself.
Yeah. No, that's really, really cool. So what are some of your, and when you're writing, what are some of your favorite, like Enneagrams, what are some of your favorite resources to kind of, inform characters or build plots, or what, just overall, what are some of your favorite resources as you write?
I'm a big fan of tools in general. So since I'm a plotter, I've over the years, I've been adding to the spreadsheet. So it started out with 5 or 6 tabs. It's got 10 or 11 tabs now, and with different types of things. So these days I start with the Enneagrams, and then GMC, Goal, Motivation, Conflict, from the Deb Dixon book, I believe. It's seminal. That was one of the first things I ever learned in RWA. Get this book. You must get this book. And that's the basis. Save the Cat, which is another book on plotting. I started using that just for my structure. And so there's different plotting systems. And depending on how stuck I am, I will plot and then I'll get stuck. And then I'll move to a different plotting system. Because they're all kind of saying the same thing, but just in different language and slightly different terminology. And so sometimes shifting my perspective helps me get unstuck. So I'll start in a Save the Cat plotting system, and then I'll go to author Dan Wells has this 7-point plot structure system, which is a little bit simpler. And then I'll move to a different one. I kind of very nice in the links here.
I know they do this, and I'm just give us all the goodness, and they'll help everybody.
Another really great book that is very, very short is called Writing from the Middle. I think that's what it's called. Write Your Novel from the Middle. It's by Jane Scott Bell. And it's very, very skinny, but it's fantastic. Another thing I use when I'm stuck, because it has since it's so short, it's very simple, but it packs a lot of punch. It taught me about the mirror moment at the very middle of the book, where your character has to confront themselves.
Yeah. And
that is really good. I have shelves full of crap. 2 or 3 of these are just craft books that I go to. And a lot of times, StoryGrid, I'm always talking about StoryGrid, which is an editing system by editor Sean Coyne. And it's kind of more advanced, and it's really for people who are more analytical. But if something is not working, I go through it and use the StoryGrid to sort of figure out why it's not working. Those analyzing tools help me a lot.
Yeah. Well, and do you talk a lot about the writing process and your tools in your podcast? I think we should definitely talk about your podcast. Is that something you talk about? And
I do, yeah,
it's a great resource for aspiring writers or current writers.
Right. Yeah. My podcast is called My Imaginary Friends, and it's a weekly look behind the scenes of an author. It's the spiel. So I kind of just go through what's happening in my podcast, in my writing life that week. And a lot of it is, I got stuck. This is what I did to try to fix it. I was scheduled, but I got off schedule, and now I'm trying to get back on my schedule. That is the genesis of, a summary of the podcast. But yeah, I talk a lot about like the tools and the craft and just techniques that I use. And as I tweak them, because every book is a little bit different and every book needs something a little bit different. Like I feel like I've got a handle on my process at this point, 4 books into the series, various other novellas floating around that I've written. But I always am excited to learn new things and read a new plot about a new plotting system, and see if I can incorporate something into my process and my system also.
The process for me has changed every single book. Like it's changed, and it's one of those things that it's like it is trying not to be too locked down about what you're like. This has to be my process because and if you think about every book has its own puzzle, even if it's in the same genre. Every book's going to have, because of what your characters are going through, every book's going to have its own puzzle. And because of that, I do think it changes the process. And so my process changes every single time, which is just really irritating because you think about
Are you a pantser in general?
Yeah. Well, excuse me?
Are you a pantser in general?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start that way, but I have, this whole series has been without a doubt pantsed. Yeah. And it's been great. It's worked for me. And it's been, it's allowed a level of freedom that I'd been writing for years and years and stopped writing because I was so locked down. And so pantsing did allow me a level of freedom. There's more structure around my pantsing now to a certain extent, and I kind of know what to expect, but still the process, the kind of tactile process. Am I using note cards? Am I using binders? Am I using highlighters? That's changed every single book based on kind of this gut intuitive sense about what is necessary at any given moment.
For me, it's changing inside the same book. I use note cards for like the first act, and then I'll switch to sticky notes and a plot board, and then I'll switch back, and it's just like, okay, whatever the problem is right now, I'm gonna just do whatever I have to do to solve it. And sometimes what I have to do is completely different than what I did last week or last month.
Yeah. I mean, it's completely evolving. And I mean, one of the things I like to share with new or aspiring authors is what works for somebody else is not going to work for you. And it's such a simple thing to say. And yet when you're at these workshops or you're at these things and these people are telling you this is how you do it, it's very hard to not, and especially when it's people you admire, it's writers you admire, this is how you do it. It's very hard to think that's not working for me. You can bang your head up against a wall with a technique that's not working for you. And that it is, not everything is going to work for you. You've got to find your own source, and you've got to reject sources that, reject that just don't feel right, that aren't getting you where you need to go, which I think
and even if it worked for you before, and then don't be stubbornly attached to that, because it could be just time to let something go that worked last time.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to get back to you talking about so right now there's a 2-book paranormal.
Yes.
That you self-published those? Were those your book? Is that okay? So the question I'm asking everyone right now is, when's paranormal coming back? Like, I'm ready. You seem ready. We're all ready. Like, is paranormal? Are we going to get more paranormal? Is it happening? I mean, do you see writing more paranormal in your future?
I do. And there's a couple reasons. I would probably still self-publish it because I don't know if traditional publishing is going to be embracing paranormal in a huge way again. I mean, that might have left. I mean, it might come back with traditional. Indie, it's always been around,
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who've been doing well with paranormal indie. Yeah. But yeah, definitely if you're trying to do trad paranormal, it's tough now. It's been tough for a while. And if you weren't already established, then like if you're not Ellen Andrews or, any of those people who are already around and people are buying them, then starting new, it doesn't seem like they're looking for it. And every year we're kind of waiting for that to change. So
we are. And it is. It's like, what's going to be the new, if it's not a new vampire, what's going to be the new take on the vampire? What's going to be that new thing? Because I think it does create, right now it seems like the rom-com. That's for the rom-com is really what has this whole, and it's very based in reality, very based in the world we know. And, honestly, the world we know right now is kind of a bummer. Like, I'm ready for the world.
I think the pandemic could be the thing that puts us back into more magic and more paranormal powers and things, because you don't want to write about reality. I mean, there was the debate of, if you're writing contemporary, should you put the pandemic in it? Are you putting masks in it? Like, do we want to read about that? Like in a year or 2 years when the trad books that are written now come out, what are people going to want to read? And so in the same way that these social upheavals like create art, like my bio says, I was born just after the creation of hip hop. Hip hop was kind of created as a result of economic strife in New York City. And so economic strife, social strife, it's going to create some kind of great art form. And hopefully, cross fingers, I could see a good case for it being way more magical, way more powers and, paranormal driven, because reality does suck.
Yeah, no, very much. I love it. What I love so much about your book and the whole series is no one else could have thought about it but you. I mean, this idea that, writing to market or writing what's big. The thing is, nobody could have taken these issues of diversity and your love of fantasy and sci-fi and your love of romance. You were the only person that could tell that story. And it's just a great example of write the story that's in you. Write what you know. Be savvy. I mean, don't be, be savvy. Know what kind of is in your industry. Know what's happening in the genre you want to write in, but write that story that is yours, because no one can say what you can say. And your series is such a phenomenally great example of that nobody could be that amalgam of all the things you love and create the series that says that is that fantasy that the very traditional lover loves, and yet has a lot more things to be said than a lot of white guys have said, just to paint just a broad brush, but it has things to say that a lot of that have not been said before, and I think that series is a wonderful, wonderful example of that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It has the unique voice, and I did not think that traditional publishing was going to be interested in what I was doing, which is why I saw it in the first place. I was really surprised and grateful. Now there's more stories from more people and more people of color being published, and I think that. And that's another reason why maybe we'll get the Black vampires and the Latinx vampires and the Asian vampires, because publishing is seeing that, we can publish these books and we can sell them and people will read them. And it's, another reason why it's ripe for a kind of awakening of that, or reawakening.
Yeah, or a disruption. God, you said Latinx vampires and I was just like, I'm going to leave. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Go start writing.
Writing to do.
I want your vampire story. I want your sexy vampire.
No, I have a whole idea of I'm not even going to go into it. It's a rabbit hole nobody wants to go down. But no, that is very exciting. So you have another book coming out. So what's kind of coming in the future for you? What do you have coming down the pike?
So this year, the third novella in this series is going to come out in an anthology. So I'm in an anthology with some other fantastic fantasy romance authors. Jeffrey Kennedy, Grace Javen, and it's called Under a Winter Sky. Mm-hmm. And so it's all the novellas are prequels, but they're meant to be read in between the books because they introduce you to characters that become very important in the next book. So I'm working on that, and those will actually be coming in audio also. So the first two novellas are out. I think all three will be bundled and for Audible later on this year and early next year. And after that, Earthsinger Chronicles will be done. I will be moving on to something new, as yet unknown. I have a great idea, like the kernel of a great idea that I haven't, I think about it a lot, but I don't have anything. Yeah. I can't tell you what it is exactly. I mean, on my podcast, I just call it the heist story. I have this, 1920s fantasy heist, and that is really all I know. But I've been doing research, in the gaps in the time that I have, because this would be a much more grounded 1920s. Earthsinger Chronicles is a second world fantasy, so it's a 1920s-esque time period with that technology, but it's not really our world. The idea I have for the next story would be more our world, and so I saw Denny was here earlier. I'm going to definitely be calling Denny for advice. I'm like, how do I research things? What is the Library of Congress? How do you do things?
Yeah.
I do a lot of research, but I don't do because it's fantasy, I'm like, well, I'll do the research and I'll make it up, like just enough to ground me so that what I make up is realistic. And this is going to be something slightly different.
Yeah, where you feel, it feels like not beholden, but it's like, you want to be respectful to the time period and the people you're talking about. Read, Love, Listen said that sounds amazing. Awesome. I want it tomorrow. That sounds incredible. Yeah, that's so awesome. We had talked earlier about discussing this, but what has it been like wrapping up a 4-book series? I mean, again, it's not out yet, but you're writing it. What has that been like for you?
It's been really overwhelming. Like I had, when I started working on this book, the 4th book I'm talking about, I hadn't really thought about it. Like the first 3, it had existed in some form for years, and I'd been putting off the 4th one because I had to revise the first 3 and get them ready for publishing. And then I was sitting there like, okay, now it's time to write this. And Game of Thrones had just ended badly. Avengers had just ended really well. And so I was like, okay, how do I end this in a way that is more like Avengers than Game of Thrones? People upset and angry with me, and I was angry with myself. And so this was the pressure that I was putting on myself. And it really is hard to wrap up the threads, to tell this story. So, I've just been doing the best I can and trusting that, okay, I've done this before. I've put out other books in this series. I have to trust my instincts. I have to trust, like, to the point when I know it's wrong, when I know it's right, and just wrapping all the threads up. So this revision that I'm doing right now feels really good. I'm really happy with the way that it's going. I'm getting really excited about this story now, and I'm really excited for people to read it and see what they think. So yeah.
That's fair. I think that revision and being like, okay, I have a book here. I think that is one of the most, I mean, I think that's an amazing feeling. And it's trusting your editors to a certain extent too, for them to be able to look holistically at it, because they're not living in it the way you are. Look holistically at it and be like, okay, this is the chunk that's missing, or this is the chunk that's, overblown or whatever, but hoping that they can help you edit, connect, pare down when necessary, all of that stuff. So it's a big deal, because we've lived with these people in our heads a long time, and saying goodbye to them and feeling like you're doing justice. But I agree, you definitely have additional pressure with, like, they can be done wrong. These worlds we've invested in, and rightfully so. It's like these fans have bought these books. It's like they can be done wrong. You have real world examples of people screwing it up. It's a lot of pressure. But you're not going to do that. You're awesome, and we all love you. Great. People who are looking at writing, writing right now, they haven't published yet, they're looking to publish, but people are writing right now, people who are looking at this time and trying to figure out, is writing something they want to go into, what would you tell a aspiring writer who is looking at 2020 and deciding whether or not they want to be a fantasy writer?
I think, if it's in you, if it's in your heart, then you have to do it. Otherwise, please don't, because it's very hard.
I love it. Please don't. Like, really.
No, I don't want to be unencouraging. Like, that's why I say if it's in your heart. I think if it's in your heart. Because I'm hybrid, and because I do like indie publishing, and I do like traditional publishing. In indie, you get people you see, it's a good way to make a lot of money, and like the Kindle Gold Rush stuff, which I don't know how valid that ever was, but there certainly are techniques that you can use to try to make money writing books. But at the end of the day, there's way better, easier ways to make money. So I think that people who write have to love it if they're going to spend all of this time and energy, and just because it's pieces of yourself. Like, I feel like I'm just putting pieces of myself into this, and it's draining, it's exhausting, but it's invigorating at the same time, and I love it. And so there's ups and downs with publishing. There's a lot of ups and downs. So if you don't love it, it's really hard to get through all of those ups and downs. That would be.
This weekend, so Leslie knows I'm a huge fan of the show Supernatural, and a fan of their two stars, Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki, who, by just sheer chance, I found out Leslie's brother knows the gorgeous star. So that's a whole other story. But anyway, Jared Padalecki was talking this week. He just said they did a live cast, like pay what you want, and they did a Q&A for fans this weekend. And I was watching. I had finished one revision of the book, and it was my prize. I got to watch this. So somebody asked him, what advice would you give to yourself as a young actor? And he said the most inspiring thing right then, which was, Jared Padalecki from Supernatural always says inspiring things. But he said, what I realized was you have to love the work. He said, there are, if you can make it as a success, there's great perks. He was like, I can pay my bills. I can go on vacations. I get to meet really cool people. He said, but the lows outweigh the perks. And it's way harder to get those perks. He said, but at the end of the day, what I look forward to when I wake up every day is the work. I want to go do the work. I want to, read these scripts and be this person and do this job. And that was so inspiring because exactly, it's like, if you don't want to get up in the morning and the main thing you want to do is, as hard as it is, but it's putting those words on the page and creating this world and creating these characters, don't do it, because the perks are not hitting a list, and the perks are not the money, and the perks are not, your favorite author, retweeting you, because those are few and far between. The lows are really, really low, and the lows are hard, but the work and sitting down and getting lost in that world and character building, that's what the value is. And if that's not, and he said, if you love acting, but you also like teaching, go be a teacher. If you love acting and you also love science, go do sciences. He's like, do anything else. And that's exactly how I feel. Do it because it's the only thing you really love doing.
That's so true. I don't know. Right.
Read love that don't fake the funk, which is the best ever. So on that note, Leslie, so where can everyone find you? And so once again, the name of the book is Cry of Metal and Bone. It's so beautiful. You can get it. So is it signed at One More Page? Are they getting signed?
They have signed book plates if you order through One More Page books. Yes. Oh, and also before we go, I want to shout out Pinsip Dunn, who was on standby because Angelina had an emergency today and wasn't sure she could make it. And so Pinsip Dunn's book comes out next week. It's Dating Makes Perfect, and it sounds amazing. You should definitely go check that out.
Definitely. Pentip's amazing. And thank you also, Pentip, because I wasn't sure I was able to be here. So that was very relieving to know somebody else could be, if not.
So Cry Metal and Bone. You can find me at lpenelope.com, and that is where all links to everything else is. And check out the podcast if you're interested in writing or.
Give the name of the podcast again. I know they put it here. Oh, yeah.
Yes, my podcast is My Imaginary Friends.
My Imaginary Friends, yes.
I'll link to it in the comments also.
Yeah, awesome. And then
where can we find you?
What? Excuse me?
Where can we find you?
Oh yeah. I'm on
a release that just happened.
I'm living on your computer all the time. Yeah, I have a release that just happened. Hate Crush. Here, let me go grab it. I'm back. Hate Crush came out June 29th. And you can get this at One More Page, as well as the first book, Lush Money. And they are romance. They're contemporary romances, sexy contemporary romances about powerful women who get what they want because they've earned it. And
I adore Lush Money. I have Hate Crush on the Kindle, waiting to be read when I have time.
It's like always like the growing TBR of amazing books. But So anyway, that will you can find me at angelinamlopez.com and then all over social media and all that really, really good stuff. Thank you so much for inviting me to celebrate this amazing day with you. Book 3, huge deal.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know you have a lot going on in your life in general and today, so I really appreciate you coming and helping out.
And on a lovely note, Amanda Harris says, not a question, just want to say I adore song, comma, breath, and I'm halfway through Whisper. I am so excited to read Hush and Cry and more. Thank you, thank you. Congrats on your release of Cry.
Yeah, this is about I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy them.
And everyone, fans, if you love a book, don't ever hesitate to let the author know, social media, you can send them an email. It's never going to be a problematic thing. So let your authors know you love them, because it is sometimes a little thankless and lonely, especially in the pandemic.
We're here in our hovels, like punched over the keyboard and like, oh, you liked it, thank you. That makes me feel so good.
It makes us feel great. Yeah.
I'm just going to sneak in here at the very end to say, well, we love you both. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. We love One More Page. It's such I did an event in June or July. I forgot, in July. And I was like, oh, I've moved. That might be one of my last. And then Leslie was like, no, come back. I'm like, yeah.
We will have you both whenever you want. That's what I say, with all of my power to do so.
I think it's recorded now, so we're definitely going to just
exactly. It's this is a legally binding agreement.
Anytime.
So thank you all both so much. Thank you all for tuning in. We have a few more fun romance month events coming up. On Thursday, myself and two of the other booksellers at One More Page, Amanda and Lelia, are sort of having a bookseller happy hour, talk about romance kind of day. And then we also, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Check us out at onemorepage.books.com. All of the buy links for all of these wonderful books and a lot of the resources that Leslie mentioned are in the comment log. So go through there and check that out. But until then, thank you so much. And I will end the broadcast now, and hopefully it will do it correctly this time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Yes, I do want to end the broadcast.